What do you say about the new covenant? Sorry, the new covenant.
Yeah.
You just mentioned that.
Yes.
Who's the new covenant for?
But the Old Covenant was like the Old Testament. Okay? The New Covenant was the New Testament.
Right.
Christ brought about the New Covenant. Because mankind was going nowhere with the Old Covenant and the Old Testament.
Yeah.
God decided to send his only begotten Son who bring the New Covenant. So it's like a new contract.
Yeah.
That's why when you read the Old Testament and the New Testament, it's totally different. You read the
They do hive in together, and it does go back to the beginning that Jesus is predicting, back to the early chapters of the book of Genesis, the first book in the Bible, where Abraham is told that his seed, his descendants, will be a blessing to all the nations. And this whole story of Israel being raised up is that Israel is supposed to be an example to the nations, and it's going to be the vehicle into which the Messiah will eventually come. And there's all the other books of prophecy talking about how the covenant that's been made with the Jews will be extended when the Messiah comes to it for all the people, like when it says in Joel that God will swear his period, not just on the Jews, but on all people. And then that's fulfilled in the book of Acts in the New Testament.
I'm sorry, you're saying that the covenant was extended to other people, but does it actually say that?
Yeah, the covenant was. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it says to all people. So it's in the book of Joel.
Christ died for all mankind.
Yeah.
Right.
Even though he came from the Jewish people, he died for all mankind. So that's where we come. Unless you're Jewish.
So, all right, but then in the when the New Testament in Hebrews, doesn't it say about the new covenant is going to be with the house of Israel and Judah? So what does that mean?
That originates from the Jewish people. Because as he was talking to the Jewish people at the time, because don't forget Christ was just on earth, so there weren't obviously many Christian followers. But he's talking about the Jewish people. You follow me?
Right.
So he's talking to the Jewish people at the time. We came in after.
Okay.
You follow me?
Right. So,
because even in the Gospels, in the Gospel of Matthew, at the end of the Gospel of Matthew, there's what's called the Great Commission, where Jesus himself tells people to take the gospel to all of the nations, not just to the Jews. Well, his period on earth was as a ministry to the Jews. That's what he was doing, because in limited human form, in that there's only so much he could do. The Jewish people was to be the vehicle for the Messiah, who had been prepared to receive the Messiah, and people knew the prophecies and were there waiting for the Messiah to come. And then Jesus himself and the other books of the New Testament explain that this now applies to all the people of the earth, which does at the same time go back even to Genesis, where the promise to Abraham is that he'll be a blessing to all of the nations.
Right, but the you know what it says about the new covenant being for Israel and Judah? Wasn't there a purpose for mentioning those two?
Where is
groups?
that?
Oh no, Hebrews 11, or is it
Hebrews
8?
11?
It's either 11 or 8.
Are you a Christian?
Yeah. I think it should be 11 actually. No, 8. It is 8, isn't it? Yeah.
Melchizedek.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So Hebrews 8. Yeah, so Hebrews 8 and 8 it says, "For finding fault with them, he said, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand, to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts. And I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people." So it sounds to me that it's going to be the house of Israel and Judah are going to be the people who he's going to put write his laws in, and then they're going to act as the example. That's what it seems to say to me.
Yeah, I think sometimes the Bible speaks exclusively and inclusively at the same time, in the sense that if it says that he's going to make a covenant with Israel, then that is true, but it doesn't mean it isn't true that the covenant also applies to other people. Or we can also understand that Israel itself can be understood to be then extended to all humanity, what he means when he says Israel. And that again goes back to the promise to Abraham.
Right.
And we've got in Paul's letters, he talks about what it means to be a descendant of Abraham, doesn't he? Where it's a spiritual seed.
So what he says here, he said that about the covenant, that you put his laws into their hearts. So then you're saying there about the covenant being extended. So does that mean then those laws would be then put in the hearts of the other people it's extended to as well?
I think what we've normally understood it means when it says about putting laws in the hearts is that the exact detail of the law becomes the principles of the law. So we no longer follow the Mosaic law in the sense of doing all the things that it says in the Old Testament, very specific commands about eat this, wash things in this way, uncleanness during menstruation, all these kinds of things. That doesn't apply anymore, but the moral principles have been written into people's hearts through their observation of the law. If they understand what the law meant, then that's internalised and you understand how that goes elsewhere. So when Jesus was talking to the Pharisees, what he was taking issue with them about often was about their failure to understand the law. They simply followed it, but they needed to understand, for example, if the Bible said, if the law said do something for the blind, then it would also mean the deaf or anybody else who was unable to support themselves because of ill health. It didn't specifically mean just
Jesus decided he was much more on the spirit of the law. Work on I got him for healing somebody, whatever was on the
healing someone on the Sabbath, yeah.
They were again did because another and he corrected them on that. He said are you completely mad? You know? Are you mad? Yeah, what they thinking?
Right, but you know you're saying about the law was given to Israel in order to guide them to So then, are you saying that with the new covenant, the other nations who come under it, they don't need any laws to guide them to that?
We still need the book as a reference point, which is what it remains, because the Old Testament's still used.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that the detail of all the ceremonial laws and so on is then followed, because once it's internalised and written into the heart, we've understood what it means. We can then make laws that are relevant to our society. Because when God gave these laws to Israel, because God is outside of time and knows past, present and future, it was always his intention that those were laws relevant to the nation of Israel in that time.
Right.
Because any body of law that's documented over time is going to by its nature cease to be in part relevant. The type of penalties that you can impose, they didn't have prisons like we have now on the scale we have now, so they used to stone people to death. It doesn't mean we should stone people to death because we've got other options of dealing with things.
Right, but wasn't there a large period of time between Moses and Jesus? So, but from what Jesus said, it sounds like in the time between Moses and when he came, he sounds like he was saying that nothing basically changed in the law, even though obviously things would have advanced. So it's as if he was trying to say that time doesn't cause things in the law to change, or say something could be not necessary anymore, just because a period of time has gone by.
Yeah.
So what I'm wondering is, so now we're here 2,000 years later, what would then make it so that now what's in the law isn't relevant to us now?
It's the fact that the law is written into the heart. We still follow the moral laws. There's certain things, and we follow the laws about because we understand about our nature and why we're created. We know that the command to love the Lord your God is still valid. That's part of our nature as human beings. Just like marriage, for example, how that's done, that comes out of our nature as human beings. So that still applies. But we know that it's wrong to do things that harm other people, because we have the law that's given of treat other people as you want to be treated yourself. We know we shouldn't murder people or steal from people and these kinds of things. But the technicalities of what punishments you might have if you did something wrong, ceremonial uncleanness, that kind of thing, that's no longer relevant.
Right. But you've got the things that you're saying about ceremonial. But what about the things more not ceremonies, but were given as commandments relate to how the children of Israel are supposed to behave, things like the Sabbath and the eating unclean meat, because weren't those things given to actually benefit the children of Israel? So then,
So they can still, they can potentially still benefit us. Yeah.
Right.
So we have to use your conscience and discussions on to work out whether that's a. But what Jesus was saying about the Sabbath wasn't don't observe the Sabbath, forget about the Sabbath. He was saying he was saying the Sabbath was made for you. So what he was saying was this is something that's being given because people need a day of rest. It goes back to what it says in Genesis when God created the heavens and the earth and all that he rested after he'd completed the creation. But we all know that we stop functioning if we don't have time off. We just get too stressed, too wound up, and so on. So he knows we still need that. But at the same time, like as if your donkey falls into a well, you don't just leave it there because it's the Sabbath.
yes.
So similarly, people who are like paramedics in our society still need to work on Sundays because you don't. If your dad has a heart attack, you expect to phone 999, and you want the paramedics there, not saying, "Oh, it's the Sabbath, we can't come." So that would be that we understand that the law has a purpose, but the detail of it has to be reconsidered.
But it's interesting you mentioned the one about the paramedics, but it seems to me that when the children of Israel were crossing the wilderness,
Yeah.
because they, at that time, obviously they were under the laws of God, it seemed that that was actually a benefit for them because
Yeah.
they didn't even need paramedics then.
Yeah.
Because God was the one handling all of the keeping them healthy.
Manna from heaven and so on.
I think they
Yeah.
must have been relying
Yeah.
on God 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like if when they were under the laws of God, it sounds like they're in a better condition than they were
I
now.
think it is because I think it's like bringing up children though that God wanted to change Israel. So he wanted people to be thinking for themselves. He wanted people to understand the meaning of the law so they could apply it properly rather than just following rules and getting down into what does it say here, which is
that's what the Pharisees did anyway.
Yeah. The Pharisaical thing where you're just doing it because it says so, when actually maybe there's something else you should be doing that day that's more important.
So you don't feel that, or you know the current way society is now.
Yeah.
Do you think, you know how you have Muslims going on about like Sharia law?
Yeah.
Would you think that things would actually be better if people went back more to doing how things were in the Old Testament?
No. Well, some of it might be. There's some things that would be better if, like people, if we followed the Genesis pattern for marriage, then great. Rather than people, fathering children and then going away, this kind of thing. Yeah, some of those things, if we followed those moral principles, society would be better. But it's not better to have something like Sharia where everything comes down to getting the book out to see exactly what happens in exactly every circumstance. Yeah, we will be second-class citizens anyway.
I don't know. I'm not Muslim anyway. So I just mean the Old Testament, because obviously with the Old Testament, it's any tax we had to pay to the Levites, it wasn't like so that they could live in big houses. It was actually so they could eat food.
That was the idea. Yeah. Just like paying for your church pastor today.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Yeah. But I think it's because human nature is sinful. Whatever stage we're at, like the Old Testament is the story of Israel, turning to God, turning away from God, turning to God, turning away from God. And it's the same now, isn't it? Because that we go through these cycles, things get better in one way, worse in another. That's how it goes. Whatever the system is, the system itself doesn't solve it. It's just in our nature to corrupt things, be selfish. That's what we're supposed to be mitigating by living the correct Christian life, praying, reading the Bible, living according to our own conscience before God. Then what we do is make sure we're the salt and the light, making things better, rather than something that's making things worse for everybody else.
Yeah, because it's something you've been thinking about recently. You know what you said about the effect the church is supposed to have on the people.
Yeah.
And when you read in the Old Testament, you can see that God was dealing with one nation.
Yeah.
So you can have like a consistency. But with the way things are now, we have all these different church denominations.
Church denominations for me was man-made.
Right.
If you look at the history of most denominations, it happened like this. A debate happened amongst Christians and they disagreed. So one lot went off with their group and another one with their group. But that wasn't God's plan. Because wasn't Christ's plan for all these denominations. That's why, even though I got saved in a certain denomination
Yeah.
in France, Pentecostal church, today I'm interdenominational.
Right.
So if you're a Christian, you might disagree on certain things, but as long as we believe in the cross and the blood, then we can talk.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't. If someone says, "What denomination are you?" Years ago, I would say something, but not anymore.
Yeah, well, Bob does that. He won't say what denomination he is when he's
So I got
asked
saved.
on
I
video.
got saved through the French Assemblies of God.
Yeah.
So the first time I heard the gospel was in French.
Yeah,
So I was
okay.
living in France.
Yeah.
They weren't anti-Catholic, but as most of them were Catholics, when they come to Christ, they kind of had a resentful past from the Catholic Church.
Right.
But as I wasn't a Catholic past, I
Yeah.
never felt like that.
Yeah.
But over the years, I realised all this denomination is just splitting brothers and sisters. Some would say that lot aren't saved, that lot aren't saved, the Catholics aren't saved, that lot will believe in the baptism of the Holy Spirit, that lot won't. And that,
Yeah.
all we're doing is arguing. We should be going out and preaching the gospel
Yeah.
to those who aren't saved.
Yeah,
And we'll leave the little pet doctrines for another time.
yeah.
But I was wondering, so what was you? Do you have any kind of idea what you think will happen in order for God to effectively bring? You know, you've got all the prophecies in like the Book of Revelation. Obviously, when you read them, there's no mention anywhere of this divided church with denominations.
One church.
So, yeah. So
One church, we're one body.
so where do you think that's going to come from?
I think when Jesus comes back, you follow Jesus because he's now going to tell you what.
I think
Yeah,
that's
no,
more.
It's clearer, isn't it?
I don't know what the brother thinks, but people like Bob,
Yeah.
myself, we're starting to realise denominational Christianity is garbage.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
what I personally believe.
yeah.
Well, I believe it as well.
It's nonsense, and
Yeah.
that's what's happening. Christians all over the world, mainly in the West, I can only speak about the West, because
Yeah.
in the third world, they're so on fire for Christ.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, they're on a different level to me.
Yeah.
In the West, all this denominational nonsense, I think it's coming to an end. And Christ is bringing out his people, all denominations, fed up with the garbage, fed up with the verbal diarrhea, fed up with the nonsense, fed up with the silly traditions, and he's bringing his people together.
Yeah.
So you can come down Hyde Park, Speaker's Corner, all different denominations supposedly, but we've realised it's
Yeah.
nonsense. And that's what I've come to.
Yeah.
That's what I was just going to say, but I suppose the thing about it is you need whatever's going to happen, because you know you said about Christ returning, but when you read about what's going to happen with the mark of the beast, any kind of coming together is going to happen before then, in order for there to be a proper response to it.
But you're going into a different.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, does that
all right.
in order to not take the mark of the beast, we wouldn't necessarily all be deciding we're all now Baptists or something. It would be that people who are genuine Christian believers, this is my personal view. I mean, you can't take this direct from here, but it's just my extrapolation would be it would be all the genuine Christian believers that end up being those who go through the tribulation and are saved.
So you understand, that there's Christians who believe in the secret rapture, there's Christians who believe in the post, pre-trib. I've come to the understanding, I just want to get people saved before it's too late.
Yeah.
So
Because most of us aren't going to be. I mean, the odds of any one of us happening to be around when that happens, we don't know if that's going to happen tomorrow or in 500 years, or do we? So we just don't know. So, but we all do know we're all mortal and we've all got our own life to live. So we just have to carry on. And I think this. It's good to understand what's in Revelation, but I don't think it's not going to be like Google Maps or something where if you don't, it's not like we're going to get to heaven and then you take an accidental wrong turn because we didn't read Revelation correctly and fall off into hell. It's going to be God will guide us at the right time. But I think it's all there for a reason, because we're supposed to recognise when these things are happening. That's why prophecy is given, isn't it? So you can, when it starts to unfold, you know what's. I think there's a concept in Daniel of prophecy being sealed, isn't there? Which not everything to do with prophecy can be understood when the prophecy is given, but when the event happens, you realise, this was it. Yeah, this was it. This was what was predicted. Now I see it unfolding in front of me. Like if you actually were suddenly raptured now, then you'd know what that theory. That particular understanding of the Bible was correct, wouldn't you? So, right, okay, that solves that one.
Yeah, no, I actually had a long discussion with the Rapture, and after the discussion, that was the only time when I finally worked out what their point was. Because every time I heard of it before, I couldn't understand.
See, I've been out to New York 8 or 9 times,
Yeah.
and the majority of American Christians believe in the rapture, the secret rapture.
Right, yeah.
I personally don't, but I'm not going to fall out with a brother over it.
No.
Yeah.
So in the end, I just had to agree to disagree and move on.
Yeah.
Because it can destroy fellowship, it can destroy what we're here for.
But actually, did you ever get down and actually have like a long because
I've studied it, yeah.
because we were talking about 2 hours, and it's only because we were there for so long that I worked out what their point was. Because before it didn't really make any sense, but when you explained it, I said, oh, I see now why they come up with that idea.
I've got friends who are Calvinists. I'm a Calvinist. You understand Calvinists? It's like chosen, once saved, always saved.
Yeah.
I've got very good
Predestination.
Predestination, it's very. But we should never laugh about the word of God, but we just laugh over our conversations. So I'm not going to fall out with the brother over it. Because when you come here, you realise how we're outnumbered. I think that's more important.
Yeah.